was one of those nights when the rain seemed to wash away hope itself. A ceaseless, cold drizzle that blurred the line between streetlight and shadow. In a city that never forgave its sinners, I, Detective James Callahan, found myself once again staring into the abyss of my own despair. Just hours ago, I had been cradling the memory of my late wife, a love lost to fate and time. Tonight, the darkness outside was all too familiar, echoing the emptiness that had consumed me ever since. I sat alone in my cramped office, a relic in a run-down building on the edge of the city. The single lamp cast trembling shadows on the stained wallpaper, reminiscent of the ghosts that haunted me. My mind was a clutter of regret and sorrow, a ceaseless replay of my wife's soft laughter, now silenced forever. Every case I took on seemed only to remind me of that fateful day when life's cruel hand snatched her away. Tonight, however, a new case would stir the stagnant waters of my grief. A call had come unexpectedly, a report of a murder in an old part of town, a quiet street where secrets festered beneath peeling paint and broken dreams. I couldn't shake the feeling that this case would intertwine with the shadows of my past. No sooner had I sealed off the scene than a small voice called out from the shadows. I turned sharply, hand resting on my service weapon, to see a young boy standing a few feet away. He was no older than 14, with eyes as wide and eager as those of a pup in search of a master. "Detective Callahan," he asked timidly, his voice quivering with a mixture of fear and admiration. I'm Tommy. I saw the police car and I wanted to help." Something in his innocent tone stirred a long dormant part of me, a memory of a time before loss had made me cynical, when I believed in the possibility of redemption through mentorship. "Kid," I murmured, my voice rough from disuse and sorrow, "if you want to help, then you'll have to listen closely. This world isn't kind, and it won't spare you its secrets." Tommy nodded solemnly, his eyes glistening with unshed tears and determination. In that moment, I realized that perhaps I could still be more than an emotional wreck, a mentor, a guide, if only for one lost soul. Back at the precinct, as I pored over the scant evidence collected at the scene, an unsettling detail kept gnawing at me. Among the usual signs of a struggle, there was a single, inexplicable clue. A long black fiber caught on Mrs. Crane's delicate shawl. It wasn't a common material, and my gut told me it belonged to someone not of this world, or perhaps someone who moved in the shadows. That night, while I was alone in my office, the rain tapping a rhythmic dirge against the window, I remembered a recurring figure in my darkest nightmares. A figure clad entirely in a long black raincoat, face obscured by a sinister mask. I'd always dismissed it as the product of grief and too many sleepless nights. Now it seemed that figure was stepping from the realm of my imagination into a terrifying reality. I could almost hear the whisper of that masked man in the back of my mind, a promise of further chaos and cruelty. The detective in me demanded answers. The broken man in me feared what I might find. Over the next several days, Tommy and I began our investigation. Our search led us through decaying neighborhoods, abandoned warehouses, and forgotten alleys where the light of civilization barely reached. Each new clue was like a thread, unraveling a tapestry of secrets that spanned decades. We discovered that Mrs. Crane had been a keeper of old town legends, a woman rumored to know more about the city's haunted past than any living soul. Her diary, hidden in a creaking chest in her parlor, detailed encounters with a mysterious figure who stalked the streets on stormy nights. According to her rambling entries, the masked man had a habit of appearing whenever darkness fell, leaving behind a trail of inexplicable tragedies. Tommy, with his youthful curiosity, often volunteered theories. "Maybe he's a ghost," he suggested one rainy afternoon as we sat in a dilapidated diner, scribbling notes on a napkin. "Or maybe he's trying to warn people about something." I shook my head slowly. It's not that simple, kid. Sometimes the monsters we fear are not warnings, they're the warnings. And sometimes they're the ones who bring about our downfall. As our investigation deepened, memories of my past resurfaced with painful clarity. I recalled the days when my wife, Marianne, would laugh softly as we strolled along rainy sidewalks, her hand in mine. Now every drop of rain carried the bitter taste of loss. I couldn't help but wonder if Mrs. Crane's fate was somehow intertwined with my own, a cruel twist of fate orchestrated by a hidden hand. Late one night, as Tommy and I pored over old police reports and faded photographs in the precinct's archives, I found a reference to a string of unsolved murders spanning back 20 years. Each victim had been marked by the same eerie presence, a silhouette in a long black raincoat, mask concealing all emotion. The case had gone cold, dismissed as urban legend. Yet here I was, on the brink of reliving my own personal hell. Tommy, ever the silent observer, broke the heavy silence. Do you think it's connected? All these murders, your wife's death. Maybe this mysterious man is responsible for everything. I sighed, the sound a mixture of resignation and fury. I'd like to believe it isn't that simple, Tommy. But sometimes the past has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. And if there's a monster behind these events, I fear he's been lurking in the shadows far longer than we imagined. One damp, fog-laden evening, while I was returning to my apartment after a long day of interviews, I felt that familiar chill, the unmistakable presence of someone watching. I walked faster, the sound of my footsteps echoing against the deserted pavement. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I saw him, a figure in a long, black raincoat standing under a flickering street lamp. His face was hidden behind a featureless mask that seemed to absorb the light around it. I froze, heart pounding like a war drum. For a moment, time itself seemed to shudder as that ominous figure stepped forward. I couldn't tell if it was an illusion wrought by my grief or something far more sinister. My hand instinctively went to my holster, but before I could draw, the figure melted into the darkness as silently as he had appeared. The rain intensified, each drop a needle of dread against my skin. I knew then that I was dealing with something that defied logic, a specter of revenge, or perhaps a harbinger of doom. The next morning, Tommy arrived at the precinct, eyes alight with a determination that belied his age. "Detective Callahan," he said, voice steady now. "I want to help. I want to learn from you. I want to be your protégé." His words, simple yet profound, struck a chord deep within me. I looked into his earnest eyes and saw a spark of hope, a chance for redemption, not only for me, but for the legacy I might leave behind. "All right, kid," I said gruffly. "But understand this. The road we travel is dark and full of horrors. It will test you in ways you cannot imagine." Tommy nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm ready," he whispered. "I want to see the truth, no matter how ugly it is." In that moment, I realized that even a broken man like me could find purpose in mentoring the next generation. Perhaps, in guiding him, I could finally escape the prison of my own despair. With Tommy by my side, we revisited every scrap of evidence. Late nights were spent under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, piecing together cryptic diary entries, old newspaper clippings, and witness statements that spoke of a masked figure. Every clue seemed to point toward a single, terrifying truth. The mysterious man was not merely a remnant of the past, but an active force, a predator who had been orchestrating a macabre dance of death for years. One particularly stormy night, as the wind howled outside like a chorus of anguished souls, we stumbled upon a crucial lead. A faded photograph tucked into the pages of Mrs. Crane's diary depicted a gathering in an abandoned church, a gathering where the masked man had been seen conversing with figures cloaked in secrecy. The image was grainy, The faces blurred, but the long black raincoat was unmistakable. It was as if the specter had reached out from the darkness to lure us into his web. Tommy's eyes widened as he whispered, "Do you think that's where it all began?" I hesitated, the weight of my own memories pressing down. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe it's just another piece in a puzzle that's been centuries in the making. Either way, we have to go there." The abandoned church stood on the outskirts of town, its once stately spires now twisted into grotesque silhouettes against a blood-red sunset. The building was cloaked in ivy and decay, a relic of a time when faith had once filled its hallowed halls. As Tommy and I stepped through the creaking doors, a sense of foreboding washed over us. Every echo, every rustle of paper or distant drip of water seemed to whisper secrets of long-forgotten sins. Inside, dust motes danced in the pale light, filtering through shattered stained glass windows. At the altar, a single black rose lay discarded, a symbol, perhaps, of mourning or a warning. I sensed that we were not alone. Unseen eyes watched us from the dark recesses of the church. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, each breath a reminder that we had entered a domain where time and terror coexisted. As we moved deeper into the sanctuary, Tommy's hand tightened around mine. "Detective," he murmured, "I feel like we're being drawn into something much bigger than this case." I could only nod, my own heart pounding in reluctant agreement. "Stay close," I warned, "and trust your instincts. There's a darkness here that even the light of day cannot dispel." It wasn't long before we encountered the source of the church's chilling aura. In a shadowed corridor, half hidden by a broken archway, he appeared again, the masked man in the long black raincoat. He stood motionless, as if sculpted from the very darkness itself, his mask glistening with a faint, otherworldly sheen. For a long, agonizing moment, our eyes met through the veil of night. In that silent exchange, I felt an unfathomable dread, an accusation, a promise of retribution. The figure spoke not a word, but the silence was shattered by the echo of a single, raspy laugh. It reverberated through the stone walls like a death knell, and I felt the ground beneath me tremble. Tommy shrank back, eyes wide with terror, but I forced myself to stand firm. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the hollow space. "What do you want?" For a moment, the masked man merely stared, his expression inscrutable behind the mask. Then, with the sudden swiftness of a striking serpent, he bolted forward, disappearing into the labyrinth of decaying corridors. I lunged after him, adrenaline surging, but the darkness swallowed him whole. All that remained was the lingering scent of cold metal and a whisper of disdain carried on the wind. In the wake of that encounter, the church seemed even more oppressive, its very walls closing in around us. I found a moment to catch my breath in a small, dusty room off the main hall. Tommy sat in a corner, knees drawn to his chest, his wide eyes fixed on the door. I couldn't help but see in him a reflection of the child I once was, eager for answers, unburdened by the weight of sorrow. Yet I also saw the threat of a future, stained with the same relentless pain that had shattered my own life. My mind wandered back to Marianne, her soft smile, her gentle touch, and I felt a fresh stab of loss. Every step in this forsaken place, every whispered secret of the past, reminded me of all I had lost. But in that anguish, a spark of resolve ignited. I could not allow the horrors of the past to claim more innocent lives. Not if I had any strength left in me. "Tommy," I said softly, kneeling beside the boy, "this case, it's more than just a string of murders. It's a message, a warning that the darkness is not done with us yet. But I promise you, I will uncover the truth, no matter how deep this rabbit hole goes." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I believe you, Detective. I want to help. I want to learn from you." In that fragile moment of connection, I felt a duty rekindled. A duty not only to the dead, but to the living, to those who still dare to hope for a better tomorrow. The investigation dragged us further into the bowels of the city, into neighborhoods where decay and despair reigned supreme. Every new lead was laced with danger, every whispered rumor a harbinger of darker deeds. The masked man remained an enigma, a phantom whose trail evaporated as quickly as it appeared. Yet with every step we took, I felt his presence growing, a malignant force lurking just beyond the reach of my fading light. Late one night, as I sat in my apartment, staring out at the relentless rain, I was overcome by memories of Marianne. I recalled her gentle words in our final moments together, her plea for me to find solace and to never let the darkness consume me. Instead, I had allowed grief to fester into bitterness, and now that bitterness fueled my every action. I resolved with trembling determination to confront not only the specter of the past, but the literal specter that haunted these alleys. I took Tommy aside and showed him a series of photographs, grainy images of crime scenes, old newspaper clippings, and a single image that chilled me to the core. A blurry snapshot of the masked man, his black raincoat stark against a background of urban ruin. "This is who we're dealing with," I said, my voice low and resolute. "A man, or perhaps something else, who has dedicated himself to spreading sorrow, and I suspect he has a personal vendetta against me." Tommy's eyes darted nervously between the photos in my face. "But why you?" he whispered. "What did you ever do to him?" I hesitated, the truth too bitter to share all at once. "Sometimes," I murmured, "the sins of the past come back to haunt us in ways we never imagined. The climax of our investigation came on a storm-lashed night, a night where the heavens roared with anger and the streets were awash in torrents of bitter rain. Armed with a newfound resolve and the raw determination of a man who had nothing left to lose, Tommy and I tracked the masked man to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building loomed before us like a tomb, its broken windows and rusted metal doors a testament to forgotten times. Inside, the air was heavy with decay and despair. I moved cautiously, every sense on high alert, while Tommy followed close behind, clutching a flashlight that barely pierced the oppressive darkness. As we navigated the maze of corridors, the sound of dripping water and the creak of old metal punctuated our tense silence. Suddenly, from the gloom ahead, a figure emerged, a silhouette in a long black raincoat. The masked man stood motionless, as if waiting for us. His presence exuded an aura of cold malevolence that chilled my very soul. "Who are you?" I demanded, voice echoing through the cavernous space. "What do you want from us?" For a long, agonizing moment, the masked man remained silent. Then, in a voice that was both mechanical and hauntingly human, he spoke. "You carry the weight of loss, Detective Callahan. You think yourself broken, but you are nothing compared to the darkness I embody. Tonight, you will face your past and pay the price for your sins." In that moment, the warehouse erupted into chaos. Shadows lunged from every corner, and the echo of unearthly laughter reverberated through the space. Tommy and I braced ourselves as the masked man lunged forward with a speed that defied mortal limits. In the ensuing struggle, I felt the fury of my own grief manifested in every blow. The clash was brutal and surreal, a dance of despair, where every strike was a desperate bid for redemption. I fought with a ferocity born of years of torment. Amidst the flurry of fists and shattered hopes, I managed to knock the villain off balance. For a brief, shining moment, as the rain battered the broken roof above, I saw the man behind the mask, a face twisted by bitterness and regret, a face that mirrored my own inner demons. But just as quickly as it had appeared, that fleeting vulnerability was replaced by a cold, unyielding determination. The masked man vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the echo of his promise and a lingering dread. In the quiet aftermath of that confrontation, as the storm began to subside and the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, I found myself alone once again in the ruins of the warehouse. Tommy stood silently by my side, his youthful eyes reflecting both fear and a resolute determination to carry on. We had not vanquished our enemy. He had slipped away into the night, but we had unearthed a truth too monstrous to ignore. I knelt by a shattered window and gazed out at the city, now bathed in the pale light of early morning. The rain had washed the streets clean, yet the stains of sorrow and regret remained etched in the very fabric of the urban sprawl. I realized that my journey was far from over. The masked man was still out there, waiting in the shadows to deliver his next blow. And so, as the sun rose, I made a silent vow. I would confront the darkness within and without, no matter the cost. Tommy's voice broke through my reverie. "Detective Callahan, what happens now?" he asked softly, a tremor of hope in his tone. I placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. "Now, kid, we keep moving forward. We follow the clues, we uncover the truth, and we let the darkness know that it has no place here. I may be broken, but with you by my side, maybe, just maybe, we can mend something in this forsaken world." As the light grew stronger and the city stirred awake, I realized that in mentoring Tommy, I had found a lifeline, a chance to redeem my past mistakes and to confront the specters that had long haunted me. The path ahead was treacherous and uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of purpose igniting within the depths of my shattered soul. The night had given us nothing but pain and uncertainty, but it had also lit a beacon, a promise that even in the darkest of hours, there remains a glimmer of hope. In the endless struggle between light and darkness, we all have our battles to fight. I am Detective James Callahan, scarred by the past, yet determined to carve a future from the ruins. And as long as the rain falls and shadows whisper, I will keep searching for the truth. For every ghost in the night, for every shattered soul longing for redemption, there is always a chance to find meaning in the chaos. This is only the beginning of a journey through the heart of despair, into the depths of mystery, and toward a dawn that might one day break the endless night.